am joined today by Georgie Enthoven, all the way from San Francisco.
Thank you so much, Emma, for having me.
Very, very welcome. We're going to be talking more about your book, Work That's Worth It. But before we get into the details of that, I'd love to understand a bit more about your own career journey and what took you up to the point of writing a book.
Yeah, just a small little question.
Yeah, I know. Just an easy one to get us started, right?
How long do we have? Okay, so what is important about my career is first, I've spent half my life in emerging markets. So that has really shaped who I am. And I was born and raised for the first 11 years in South Africa, and also lived in Mexico City for 10 years. But when I graduated from UC Berkeley in the Bay Area in the US, knew I wanted to live in San Francisco, and that was about the only anchor I had for my career, other than I really wanted to do good in the world. I had majored in something at the time, which is something that I pieced together called third world development, which would maybe in today's world be called emerging markets. But I knew I wanted to help people, be of service. And what I ended up finding pretty quickly on is the jobs that were available in the Bay Area that met my needs on doing good or were in companies that had a strong value system, a strong mission, were very low pay and often like really remedial work, such as handing out flyers on streets. And I didn't get to see a pathway that looked like it could meet my ambition. So I ended up pivoting and started working in tech. And there it was really interesting because found it really stimulating. I loved the people that I worked around. I quickly met my ambition. I started learning lots of skills and got the corporate ladder quickly. And what I didn't really pay attention to the time, but I now in retrospect think about is I ended up doing a lot of volunteer work on the side. And so I volunteered at a school teaching, and I also helped at the time, this is way back when, but I was helping wire public schools with cables so that they could have access to the internet. And I was helping people with business plans. And so I was always involved in other aspects that sort of fed my soul. But I was doing that sort of after work, in between work, whenever I could get a spare moment to do that. But that was not a sustainable solution that I could have done once I had children, and I do have 3 kids. And then after later on in my career, actually, when I did have children, we were living in Mexico City. My husband is from there. And I pivoted hardcore to the impact side. And I really thought about, okay, so what is worth me giving up time with my children? It has to be something I really care about. And what I noticed is I ended up it was mostly consulting roles or short-term projects at the time, balancing motherhood. But what I noticed is I was working on these projects that paid me very little. And there was no opportunity to get paid more in the work that I was doing. And so it was fine as a project because I felt very fulfilled being able to do that work and good about the time that I was taking away from my family. But it was not something that was sustainable. And only way later, and I'm talking like mid 40s, did I actually start to realize that there are people that are able to combine income and impact. And I started to be really curious about those roles. And at the time I thought, if I had only known this earlier on, probably would have been a really good path for me.
Yeah.
Right before COVID, I got certified in coaching. And the book really came out of me understanding more about what motivates people and what they are interested in, and building a framework around careers that could have income and impact. And so that really sort of became an opportunity to try and meet the needs of my younger self.
It's so interesting, isn't it, that sometimes you need hindsight to be able to piece those things together. As you said, meet the needs of your younger self. I've experienced that as well. And yeah, I wonder sometimes if you can't actually figure it out in real time. It takes that experience and those years to go by, and that reflection sometimes to go, okay, now that makes sense. If I can put those 2 things together, then that would have met, she said, met my needs.
Yeah. I think, Emma, you're so right. And I think, well, the book that I've written is really geared towards young professionals. So people who are interested in having a contribution in their career. But your question is really important is, are we able to help people get there faster? And that is what I'm counting on is if people are able to see the pathways and the opportunities and the inspiration earlier
Yeah.
on, that they will make choices like that. I really wanted to do good in the world and I just couldn't find the right opportunities. But if I could go back to myself and present these options, and
Yeah.
then I may have found that pathway earlier, and then the overall impact I have had in my career would be significantly different.
And I also really like your point that it's not an either or, that you can be ambitious and have this really, powerful career and do good whilst also being financially successful and stable and achieving those gains. It doesn't have to be one or the other, which I think sometimes can be presented that way, and through your own experience you sort of felt that you were having to make a choice between one or the other. And I also have lots of conversations with people where they are feeling like they have done that. Perhaps they chose the
Yeah.
financial path and then they sort of get to a point where they're like, I don't feel like I'm really having interesting. They don't tend to use the word impact as much. It tends to be more that sort of purpose or
Yeah.
meaningful that comes up, but impact also. How did you, again, simple question, I suspect there's a lot a lot that
Bring it
goes on
on.
behind there. How did you come to write a book? This is your
Yeah,
first book.
this is
Yeah.
it is my first book, and I would say I had a really magical experience. And I'm not religious per se, but I had an experience that I guess some people would say is probably like a religious awakening. But after COVID, I was really exhausted after managing a household of three kids and lots of chaos. And my kids went to a summer camp and they go to a place that's actually for 4 weeks in the summer. And it gave me a chance to reset. And I told my husband, my mom, my one of my best friends, like nobody could come with me, but I was on a mission to go find my own rhythm again. And I went to
I
Portugal,
love that.
and the COVID had just, well, the countries were just starting to open up to tourism. And so I ended up like 3 days earlier than I left, booked the whole trip. So it was kind of on a whim. And within 24 hours, I got what I call the book download, which I know it sounds really woo woo, and I'm not that woo woo, but it came to me just like with absolute clarity. And there were three pieces of information I read that day that sort of everything came together. And I thought, I know what I'm here to do. This is what I have to take on. And the first was I read a Harvard Business Review article that wasn't about this topic, but it mentioned this. And it said the average career is 90,000 hours. And I thought that is such an enormous amount of time. And I, at this point, was in my 40s and never had heard this number and had been to Harvard Business School and were around career-oriented people all my adult life. And we'd never talked about the totality of those
No,
hours.
I've
And
never
I
heard
thought
that number.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah. And no one sort of really, sometimes we think about the one job or two jobs ahead, but we're not thinking about like you've got 90,000 hours and that's like a hugely
Huge. Yeah.
influential amount of time that you're going to give to something. And what if we use that time for good? And the second piece of information I read was a really wonderful cartoon in the New Yorker, and it had two women sitting on a sofa. And behind them, they have all the weather patterns, and it says like hurricane, floods, fires, and all the mess. And you are from Australia, you know those, the weather issues firsthand. But they look at each other, and one says to the other, I don't think giving up straws is going to be enough. And that was such a pungent cartoon, like it really hit me. And then the third piece of information was the UN came out with their report, as they do, and it basically said, they've run all the different kind of financial models, and if we can curb emissions to the 1.5 degrees, that will allow us to even potentially have control over weather, planet, natural disasters. But we don't even know if that number is going to work. But if we surpass that, we lose control. And I just thought, what are we doing? Like, I don't see anybody changing anything around us on a major scale to change this. like, how are we going to stop this? And I just, at that moment, was, we have to use business as a force for good. And it has to be not just on the fringe of what we do, but like the main meal. And how do we do that? And so
Just a small
that's sort of
question.
what, yeah. And actually, what was really beautiful, and I will tell your listeners, is there's two ways to write a book. One is you've been doing something for 20 years and you've already like got all the expertise and you put it into a book to share more broadly. But the second way, and this is the same for a podcast too, is you have a huge curiosity about a question. And I was on a quest of like, how do I find work that's worth it? How do I find work that has a meaningful contribution and compensation to match? And I originally started with just, okay, well, let's figure out business for good. But very quickly on, I realized you can't tell ambitious people to give up income. That is not going to be a solution that can be like an everyday solution. So you're going to have to figure out a way to get and for people to be able to live the life they want to live, but also feel incredibly rewarded from the contribution that they're making. And so that's sort of the corner that I ended up focusing on. And the highlight, I will say, is it was not hard to find these people to interview for the book. So much so that I ended up putting people on a podcast too. And they're not diamonds in the rough. Yes, they are diamonds, but they are so many more of these people that I realized. And part of my mission is to really highlight these pathways of opportunities and show how other people have been able to craft a career that's good for them, good for the world, in all different ways. And so that people can start to find role models and pathways that may work for them or give them inspiration to change a part of what they are doing at work so that they also can contribute positively.
I particularly liked that aspect of the book, the interviews, and not just interviews, but the sort of threads of the people that kind of carry through, because the theory and the framework is also great and incredibly helpful, and would like to talk about that in more detail, but then to have the real world examples of Grace and Debbie and all these people, of
Yeah.
how they've actually kind of put that into practice. I think it helps you to picture yourself in those scenarios and sort of ask yourself those questions. How you mentioned that actually they weren't sort of few and far between, these people, there were actually a lot of them, but how did you go about finding them? How did you go about finding people
Yeah.
to interview?
I mean, this has been a passion of mine for a long time. So I would say I already either knew some people or had already had like my list of people that I admired. And I often think of role models and sort of help paving the way, but part of what a role model can be is someone you've never met, you've just read about. And so that also allows you to have inspiration from their story. So I think I was always interested in the space, and I did a lot of reading. Like if I look on my Instagram account, I have lots of people that are doing all sorts of extraordinary things in the world. Like that is just something that I am interested in. So it wasn't hard for me to start the initial conversations. And I will say that almost 100% of the people I asked responded yes. And so that is one of the nice things. When you are doing good work in the world and you are contributing positively to the world, people want to get behind you. And so it was one of those things where what I really was after was curating all sorts of different types of people in different industries, different type size companies, different parts of the world, different, or like depending what they studied was different, how they
Yeah.
got started different. And so that you could sort of find your on ramps through
Yeah.
these different characters, and like there would be somebody that you identified with. But what was interesting, and this is kind of where the framework comes in, is as I was interviewing these people, there were some attributes that really stood out in these what I call disruptors for good, that were universal in the kinds of people that I was finding that were able to create these jobs with income and impact. And so that helped me develop the framework.
I was just about to ask that actually, and you you were straight in there
I'm
with the
segueing.
yeah, exactly, of how, because that would, I guess, be my assumption, that when you're talking to numerous people who have sort of gone on this journey, that there would be key themes and things that you'd be able to kind of pull out. So yeah, tell me about those. Tell me what they were.
Yeah. Well, so part of it is also with my coaching background that I had some insight in a lot of tools that people can use for introspection to really understand themselves better and be more intentional with their time. So it's a mix of what I heard from these different role models, from clients that I was coaching, and from the tools that I had learned and could apply it to this type of work. And so the first one is, I call them the 7 C's. And the first one is your capabilities. And this is was one of my big ahas of my coaching life. Is I had, gone through a long career, worked in all different environments, but I knew myself. I hardly knew my strengths at into 2 decades of working already. And I hardly knew my strengths. And if anything, I was really drawn to leveling up weaknesses than leaning into strengths. And I think that's part of our education system.
I think so.
And
Yeah.
also when you have ambitious people, we like to be challenged. And so if I'm not a super numbers person, I want to learn everything about accounting and finance so that I can hold my own in a meeting. But instead of spending time really understanding where I had advantages and stood out, I spent time building up things just to be able to play the game and to participate and I guess keep doors open. But what I noticed about these people who are the disruptors for good is they very quickly honed in on their strengths and lent into them, or not just strengths, their advantages in life, which I call the capability. So the first chapter is really understanding that. And part of it is also, it's really easy. Just ask the people around you, what are the 3 to 5 things that stand out about me that that you think are why people would come to me, or what you would, how you would describe me. And it's interesting to hear what comes back. And you can also do more formal, traditional stuff like Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinder. And I always say, use what you want out of those tests that give you the information that you want to act on, but don't worry so much about it being perfect, because obviously just designed by humans, and might be good, but it might not actually totally summarize who you are. But so the first one is on capabilities. The second is actually on contribution. And what I noticed in a lot of the conversations I had, there was an aversion to the word purpose, and especially find your purpose.
Yeah.
And it feels or your passion, find your passion, figure out your passion and go do that.
Easy.
And there was this, first of all, it's not easy. And second is it feels very intimidating if you haven't woken up one day and been
absolutely.
gifted this wonderful passion that you are about to go change the world with. And so I don't want people sitting on the sidelines waiting for that day. And in the meantime, working a job that they find very unfulfilling. And so what I noticed is the people that I had interviewed is they got started. They're people who care about what they do. Just a good enough career isn't interesting to them. They want something great. And they got started. And so how do you get started? Well, it can start with just picking one word. And you don't find a passion or find your purpose, you build it. And I usually try and refer to it as a personal mission, because we're very comfortable with companies having a mission. And so you also can have a mission. And I loved on many of the interviews that I did is people had already, even without any sort of formal work to get there, but they had these declaration statements that I will end homelessness in my generation, I will reverse diabetes in 1 billion people, or just these crazy statements that all of a sudden the gravity towards them and the work that they're doing becomes, this upward spiral, because they have such a clear idea about what they want to achieve and be known for, and they feel proud of their work. So that's the second pillar, and I'll just tell you about the third, because otherwise you'll have me talking all day. But the third is compensation, and it's a really important pillar, because what ended up I've realized in writing the book is part of my ambition is to get the kindest, nicest people in the world with the big hearts and more empathetic and are able to really make good decisions on part of others and humanity, the world, how do we get them onto bigger platforms?
Mm.
And a lot of the structure we have in business keeps them small. So small not-for-profits, teaching without a big stage. And
Yeah.
so we get these like nurses, like we don't give them the main stage. We don't give them the bigger platform. And so if we look at who have those platforms, I mean, particularly in the US, like we don't have the kind-hearted people on the stage determining where we're spending our money, what we're putting our time and effort towards. And so my goal is to get those people into C-suites and boardrooms and get them to play larger. And so compensation, part of it is about just opening up the channel so that you're willing to earn
Mm.
more.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the work of doing good, often people think, but how can I charge for that? They need it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of concepts where you're able to do really well. And also, that means you can have an even bigger contribution.
Yeah. It's such an interesting point, isn't it? And I think sometimes it almost feels kind of baked in, that idea that if I care and I want to do good, then I shouldn't care about the money. Or there's some weird kind of, I think, things that we probably tell ourselves baked into
Yes.
baked into some of that it shouldn't matter, or I shouldn't care, or it should be about helping people. And yeah, absolutely, but you can do that and also and
Yeah.
also, make good money. And also, as you said, there's so much more behind it than just making good money, but it's the building businesses for good, because it's just the way of the world, isn't it? It has to be financially viable to build that business, to scale that business, to have people want to be involved and employed in that business. Like, you almost can't do one without the other.
Yeah, and that's actually what I love about this 90,000 hour number is
Mm.
it makes you realize you can't last unless
Yeah.
you're receiving for the
Yeah.
work that you do. And so if you actually really care about the contribution that you want to make or the people that you are serving, why not build a system
Yeah.
that you can do that for the long haul? And in order to do that, you're going to need to be replenished. And income is a part of that. And I
Mm.
call compensation more than just income, but
Yep.
income definitely is a piece of it. And
Yeah.
if you are one of these kind-hearted people and you are working incredible hours to do really good work in the world, but you are undercompensated, first you burn out, but also
Mm.
you may notice that you are feeling jealous of your friends who have a more frivolous work life and get to go on vacation and they're not carrying the heavy load of helping children with, economic difficulties or
Yeah.
abuse or whatever it is. And so you start to notice those feelings. And what I really like is to use them as indicators. It looks like you want more. It's
Yeah.
like you don't want their job, but these are the pieces of information that your body is telling you that you actually need more to be able to
Mm.
keep going. And so I think it's a gift to be able to find work that is worth it for you, that allows you to keep going for the 90,000 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said at the beginning, I think that's where that metric of the 90,000 hours becomes so important, because it changes the framing of it. It's, yes, you might be able to do that for 2 or 3 years, 5 years perhaps, but it is not sustainable in the long term. And if
Yeah.
that's what we're all building for, the 90,000 hours, it kind of forces you to look at it slightly different, and potentially make some different choices along the way there. The
Yeah.
other thing that I really liked, particularly in the capabilities section, and completely agree with what you said there about we often don't kind of focus on our strengths. And I think also we're not, as humans, necessarily always good at knowing what makes us great, or what our gifts are, or what makes us unique. I see it all the time, and your advice to kind of ask other people is awesome, because they'll probably say it straight off the top of their head, because they see you do that stuff every day. But I liked your sort of broader definition of it, that it wasn't purely sort of what we would think of as, I guess, kind of classic work-based skills. It was,
Yeah.
your life experiences, your worldviews, your values. It was a kind of
Yeah.
a broader framing. And again, I really liked that. And I thought, particularly given the end goal, it makes perfect sense to have that wider framing.
Yeah, and I think when you are building a career around a contribution that you want to make to the world, it's often because you've experienced some kind of injustice, or
Yeah.
it could actually be some incredible fortune that
Mm.
you want others to experience or not to experience. And so your perspective and your lived life becomes a really interesting part of your motivation and the foundation to understand who you are delivering to. And so, yeah, I think, on your resume, it definitely doesn't ever ask what are the perspectives that you
Yeah.
have that might help you in this particular role. And one of the questions I'd love to ask people coming to interview for a role is, what will you be known for in this company that we're not asking you
Mm.
for this job description? And it's like the things like people get known for is the one who's always celebrating the birthdays and bringing the cakes and bringing people together, or the person setting up the softball team and getting people to go play and bond and have a great time so
Mm.
that they work better together. And we're human after all. And so, especially in this world of AI, just at the beginning, to start
Yeah.
to turn everything upside down, we really need to lean into sort of the human side of what we
I
do.
agree.
And a lot of that is connecting with creating goodwill and listening to people and community and understanding the people around us and letting them know they matter.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned connection there, and again, there was a sort of phrasing that I absolutely loved one of the other seven C's is connection, and I love this phrasing of safety net and trampoline. I just thought that was so clever. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah. Now, this is interesting because before I included in this chapter, I wrote to my cousins because we meet once a year, and been talking about this concept. Like, there's 8 of us, and we've been talking about this concept of a family business is like, for the next generation, how do we serve as a safety net and a trampoline? And I don't know where or how we pieced it all together, but the concepts came from that conversation. And I wrote to everyone saying, "Are you okay if I'm using this in the book? Like, I know I contributed to it, but I don't really know like exactly where it started." And everyone was like, "High five, go get it." But the truth is, it gives a really simple way to think of the people in your world. And what was interesting to me in the work that all the interviews that I did for the book is, and especially if you read about or learn about or hear people talking about doing great work in the world, the people in their safety net are often not the people around them at work, but those people end up being an absolute critical part of why you are successful. And so having a few close friends, like, it doesn't need to be a large group, but who are the people that are going to look you in the eye and call you out when you are not being authentic to who you are, or hold you when you've taken a huge risk and you fail and you need get someone to pull you up, or just to give you loving support and say, "I believe in you, go do this." And without that safety net, you are at a significant disadvantage. And I know
Mm.
it's hard to create for many people. And I just want to really emphasize how important that is, that it's a small group, could even be one person, but
Yeah.
like a small group of people who have got your back and love you. And believe in you. So
Mm.
that's the safety net. And the trampoline is a whole different group of people, but you could potentially have somebody in both
Mm.
groups. But the trampoline are people who say, like, "Stand on my shoulders," or like, "I'm going to help you skip 5 steps, like snakes and ladders, like get you like way, way
Yeah.
higher. I've got a contact for you. I want you to meet because it's going to change everything of what you're doing." Like, these are the people that give you the huge jump. And they may actually be people that are in your network that you know. They may be people that you just meet one time on an airplane and passes on something.
Mm.
Or it might be somebody you just read about and their story is so inspiring that gives you the trampoline effect of. So I don't like, for me, trampoline includes anything from a formal mentor to somebody that, like, for me, one of the people that I really admire, who would be like, I don't want to say like a such trampoline because I've met her, but she doesn't know who I am. But like Jane Goodall, I find her story so inspiring, and how she's been able to have such a significant contribution to the world, but it's been so clear what she's focused on that she knows what she's saying yes to and no to. Like, obviously she would care about women's issues, but women's issues are not her
Mm.
her section of the world that she's contributing to directly. Indirectly, of course, but I really admire the work she's done. And if I have to think of like, you know, who are the people that I've like really look up to, she would be one.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because there is that assumption that when you talk about, I guess, particularly from the word connection, that it's someone you know, that you have a sort of a two-way relationship with. But I think certainly in terms of the trampoline and perhaps some of that sort of aspirational thinking, or showing what's possible, or, you know, leaving behind the footprints for someone to follow in, it doesn't have to be someone that you have a two-way connection with. You can connect deeply with someone that you don't know, just based
Well,
on their mission and what they're
y-
doing, like your example there.
yeah, I mean, my personal example is this Harvard Business Review article on the 90,000 hours. Like, I don't know the woman who wrote the article, and
Mm,
the article was actually about happiness or something else. Like, it wasn't even about doing good with your career.
yeah,
But those words in that article hit me in a way
yeah.
that set me on this like massive trampoline jump. And so we don't always know how we're being a trampoline for others, but I do think it's really an important work to think not only of who are the safety net and trampoline for you, but who are you also contributing towards, and making sure that it's reciprocal, not tit for tat like each time, but that you have a mindset of abundance, that
Mm.
you are willing to help people and provide either the safety net or the trampoline for others as well, not just take.
Yeah, I love it, and it's so clever because even as you're talking about it, I just have such a visual of it in my mind. It's really great. So well done, you and the cousins. I love it. It's really it really stood out for me. It's probably a little bit like asking you to choose your favorite child, but do you have a favorite interview, or a favorite? You called them characters before, but the people in the book that you kind of share their stories. Is there one that you particularly love?
I mean, I'm going to answer it a little bit differently. There's
Mm,
no one person, but here's what I love. What I hear from these kinds of people doing this work is just such a different way of thinking, and they're showing up at work. The same person you are showing up at home is like a really clear distinguisher of these kinds of people. They don't need a work persona and a home persona,
mm,
because their work is just such an important part of who they are and their identity, but in such a positive, natural way. And so these people say things like, and this is what really impacts me, and this is why I want to share this versus like one person, but
mm.
it's pretty universal. They say things like, I look forward to Mondays. I don't mind coming home from vacation. I am so excited about the people that I get to work with and am surrounded by. Or, I mean, even you have people say, I love this work so much, I would do it for free.
Mm,
And most people do not ever have that kind of experience.
yeah.
And, I was in a room of students on the Stanford campus this week, and I was asking them, have you guys, of your parents, like, who of them had like a fulfilling career? And nobody raises their hand, maybe one or two. And even the ones that did they feel fulfilled in a way that they were also rewarded for their career? No,
Mm,
hands down, right? And so we don't have examples of this like that are tangible often like in our world, but these people exist, and they're working in such a different way. And this is what was so exciting for me with the work that I'm doing, is, and especially having a coaching background, is I can't want something for somebody more than they want it for themselves. Like
yeah.
that is like coaching 101. You learn. You can't want the client to make the right changes or more than they do. And first of all, I don't know what's right for the client also. But when people feel intrinsically motivated, they are more likely to create the path for themselves that is more rewarding. But if they can feel that the rewards are worth their while. And what's interesting about this kind of work, when you are able to combine income and impact, or good for you, good for the world, you are able to find a career that is invigorating and fulfilling for you. And so, yes, I'm interested in the benefit for the world, for the climate, for humanity, for my kids, for the future. But the person doing the work is actually the person who's got the greatest benefit. And that I love. Like that came together in a way that I was not expecting. I thought maybe people feel obligated and this is sort of our collective good that we have to do. But no, they actually live a richer life because of it. And so that part I am so excited about because that felt pretty universal too.
Yeah, well, I think that's the beauty of it, isn't it? That's actually what sort of knits it all together. It's that, I don't really like this word, but I'm going to use it because I can't think of another one. That the idea of kind of being in flow, I guess, that you're doing work that is impactful and meaningful to you, and that then flows out into impact and meaning for others, and then that just kind of grows and scales until it becomes something much larger. And I think also to your earlier point, which really resonated with me, that idea of kind of work me and non-work me very much resonates, because I know I spent 20 years of my career feeling exactly like that. Like they weren't that different, but they were different. Like there was definitely work me and non-work me. And I think certainly in the last, I would say 7-8 years, that's really changed. And certainly now with what I'm doing, it's all the same. It's just
Yeah.
me.
Yeah,
And
just
there's
you. And then,
something
I
really
mean, what a
liberating about that.
liberating and a huge amount of energy to give back to
Yeah,
you.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah. And it's interesting because the younger generation, I mean, I am Gen X, and I think about like even women in the workforce, like, and equality, like, we knew these things were happening, but we didn't know we got to question it too.
yeah,
Like we kind of all just said, okay, well, suck it up. This is the way it is. And
yeah,
just, do the best you can. The younger generation knows it's happening and questions it and presents solutions. And so I love this younger generation because a lot of the pushback that they are giving the older generations of the people in leadership positions is actually legitimate pushback of this work is uninspiring.
yeah,
I'm not interested in meeting these deadlines if I don't know what I'm working for. I don't want to just fit into a box and be told what to do. Give me the problem and I'll find a creative way to solve
yeah,
it. And so they're pushing back on ways that we never did. So it feels really uncomfortable and potentially even disrespectful. But they're breaking a system and a cycle that is really important that we move through.
yeah. I totally agree. It's interesting, isn't it? It's perhaps we're in that sort of messy middle phase where both sides are trying to kind of work out what that looks like. It'll be interesting. I don't know how long that's going to take, but I agree with you. It definitely feels like that's where we are. My final question, Georgie, and it's always the final question here, and that is, what do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful question. And part of it is I think you've got to go through the journey. But I think
Yeah,
the biggest piece for me in writing the book is we're in a time in our world where we're consuming so much, and the consumption is more and more and more information, and especially with social media and then all the TV platform, to watch movies and shows, and like we're constantly inputting and we're doing a very little of synthesizing, using, and outputting. And I think if I could go back to my younger self, I would say you're going to have interesting ideas and a contribution to make. Trust yourself. It's okay to take some of the spotlight and get those ideas out because that's not how I was raised. And so I think I sort of kept really busy achieving and accomplishing, but I didn't realize that I could go within and actually produce something that felt really important and valuable that I feel proud of. And so it's taken me a long time to get there.
I love that. That's a really lovely, beautiful answer. Thank you so much, Georgie. Such an interesting conversation. And I actually said just before we started recording, uh, I loved the book. And one of the things that really stood out was, yes, there's this kind of overarching idea and concept, but then there's so much kind of structure and framework in the book to help someone and walk them through kind of how they think through these things and how they probably most importantly, actually put a plan in place to get there. And there's say great framework and great structure and exercises in the book. And I think also you mentioned that there's exercises on your website that they can go to get kind of further resources. So there's a lot there to kind of help someone that has listened to this and thought that all sounds amazing, I want to do that. If someone does want to do that, where should they go? How can they kind of find out more?
I presume you have show notes and everything. So, because my name can be a little bit hard to spell, but GeorgieEnthoven.com. I've got all my information there. And you can also go to workthat'sworthit.com if that's easier for you to remember spelling. And I usually drop a podcast every week of a role model doing sort of work that's ambitious and rewarding and often in a more corporate setting. So I have examples of like lawyers and business people of all different kinds of, even a politician, a doctor, like, you know, different professions for people to learn from. And I just would love to hear from anybody of what their personal mission is as they build it. And probably the best way to follow me on like a day-to-day basis would be Instagram is the platform that I spend the most time on, but I'm also on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook, but Instagram is the one that I'm most active on.
Great. Thank you so much. As I said, really enjoyed it, and I love what you're doing. It's your mission, I guess. It's really interesting, and I just love the story of how you came to do it. But thank you very much for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure, and you create such a lovely environment to share a story. So thank you so much for that too.
Thank you.